All right. Well, afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much again for joining us. My name is Ashley Wilson, and I am leading this great panel about partnering diverse candidates and organizations with diverse consultants and tech solutions. Again, my name is Ashley Wilson. I am the Director of State and Local Campaigns at NGP Van, and I've had the pleasure of working with this great panel in some capacity or another. This is a conversation we've actually been having, internally, like just among ourselves. And we just wanted to bring this conversation out to the progressive community about diverse candidates, diverse organizations, and then consultants and tech solutions that really work. And so I'm going to allow everyone to just have a few seconds, a few minutes to introduce themselves. So I'm just going to start with Henry. If you wanted to start, just let us know where you're from and where you're working, and then we'll just go from there.
Hi, everybody. My name is Henry McKembe, pronoun he, his, him. I am the CEO of Do Big Things. I am based here in Washington, D.C., and I am very excited to be joining Netroots Nation this year, although virtually. It's still a great pleasure to be here. And I'll pass, pass it back to you, Ashley.
Thanks. Morgan, go for it.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Fletcher, pronoun she, her, hers. I'm the Director of Marketing and Storytelling at Girls for Gender Equity, which is a Brooklyn based nonprofit that focuses on centering Black girls, cisgender and transgender, and gender expansive youth of color in the fight for racial and gender justice. They're in Brooklyn, but I am not. I'm actually right outside of Lynchburg, Virginia. And I'll pass it to Akila.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Akila Inslee. I had to think about that. Good afternoon. I'm Akila Inslee. I am the CEO and president of Invictus Strategy Group. My pronouns are she, her, hers. We are a minority owned, women owned political and finance consulting strategy firm. So we have worked with everyone up and down the ballot from federal elections all the way down to county commissioner. And one of my major goals with the work that we do is prioritizing candidates of color to ensure that they have the resources that they need so that they can be seen and heard, having access to donors and other political stakeholders nationally to elevate them and move their races so that we can get the right people elected.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for those introductions. So we can get started. Give me 1 second, trying to manage all my tabs right now. All right. and so a couple questions, just to kind of get the conversation started. With for Henry and Akila, wanted to ask you all as consultants, what trends did you see in terms of diverse candidates, Black candidates, Indigenous candidates, people of color candidates, and nonprofit orgs that serve those communities? Like, what trends did you see from the last election cycle, and then this cycle as well? And how did you get involved with these campaigns and organizations? So I'll start with Henry, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think in life cycle we saw a lot of candidates of color jumping into the race, and we had organization with great success like Collective PAC that brought some of those candidates to the front. We at Do Big Things had the opportunity to work with ANPL, who are trying to recruit more candidate of Indigenous background to run for office. Right, so we see more and more on institutions that understand how political power works and that are putting in place these structures to recruit and train candidates that are typically of underrepresented communities in our political sphere. So what I'm hoping to see this cycle is more of that, right? But also spending money earlier, right? So those candidates, as Akila mentioned, can get the infrastructure, can get the teams, and can get the team together to push a really good run together. Akila, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we saw a really big wave of Black, Brown, Indigenous candidates in 2020. I think there was a massive sense of urgency that I think all of us, in a sense, benefited from, whether you are working with an organization or as a consultant. There was money to spend. And we had a lot of donors that were actively engaging and putting their money not only behind candidates that they may not otherwise have done for, however, also organizations to make sure that the vote was being moved on the ground, that there was field engagement taking place, and voter engagement across the country for candidates of color, and then also communities of color to make sure that turnout was what they needed it to be. So I think that it was a continuation of 2018 where we saw like the
Mhm.
Stacey Abrams, Andrew Gillums. And I think from the candidates that we worked with, we had four congressional races and four Senate races. Four congressional, three Senate races, the majority of which were Black and Brown, and one Indigenous candidate out of Idaho who's running for US Senate. Everyone made it to the general except for one person. So that was really phenomenal to see. Even if they didn't necessarily break through and win, they had the ability to move the meter with the work that they were able to do and with how they were able to galvanize. So I'm just hopeful that we see that continue as organizations are striving now to gain funding, et cetera, to prepare for next year's midterms.
Yeah, I think two places where I would like to see more of is some of those non-sexy races, right? So the
Mhm.
judicial races in a lot of states, judgeships are elected, and I
Mhm.
haven't seen a group that are promoting Black and Brown Indigenous, folks to run for those offices. And we all had a summer of reckoning with BLM, but I didn't see a lot of sheriff candidates, right? That were people of colors, like, right? So
Right.
there has been a lot of work done, right,
Mhm.
and to bring a diverse set of candidates to the field. But I think it has been often towards the sexy legislative positions, right? There are
Right.
other arenas where we can continue to do that, right? School board races, right?
Mhm.
What books are going to be introduced? What kind of curriculum are going to be represented in our schools, right? When we're talking about police training, well, that budget often stands with the sheriffs, right?
Yeah.
And judgeship, when we're talking about the justice movement, and making sure that our sentencing is fair, right, across races. Those are some of the places where I feel like we have some work to do still.
Mm.
No, definitely, definitely. And I think, to add like in terms of like organizations that like NGP and Every Action has like partnered with too, we work with like Run for Something and some of the
Mhm.
national committees to, help us to identify like those candidates too, right? To for us to see, who's getting trained, who needs help,
Mhm.
and for us to then make sure that we're getting them the tools that they need to run those races. So hoping to see more of that again this next cycle. So for sure.
Mhm.
And hopefully that they will also tap into those campaigns that you were just mentioning, Henry, just like the sheriff races, the things that they're not sexy races.
I know
uh,
nobody wants to be like, I'm running for sheriff, vote for me. But it's important. I understand it's not
It is
no,
sexy.
it
I would
important.
definitely
I would
is.
Just
contend
like
it's important.
we got major judicial races right now taking place in Pennsylvania. They're going to be
Pennsylvania,
huge.
yep. Hmm.
There are quite a few mayoral elections that are taking place literally within, I guess, less than a month from now when you think about it with E-Day.
Yes.
So, all of those are going to be hugely impactful and probably lay the foundation for next year.
Yep, for sure. So to Morgan, and I'm just going to provide a little context. So Morgan's organization is a client of both like the Every Action NGP as well as with Henry at Do Big Things. So the question I had for you is like, what led you to decide to work with Do Big Things, for instance? Like, what are the benefits, advantages of working with an organization led by a person of color, especially for your organization?
Yes. So, fun anecdote time. When I actually first entered into discussions with Henry about collaborating with GGE, he wasn't yet at Do Big Things. He was making the transition in. And as he was making that transition, I was so appreciative because he was so transparent about that shift. And he was saying, but I think even though I'm, moving over to this space, I think that you will be comfortable in it if you do still want to work together, because this is an organization that is founded and run by, although he obviously stepped into her seat as CEO, but a woman of color. And there's very intentional hiring here to create a diverse staff. I believe the staff is 50% people of color identifying. And so it was easy for me to say, oh, well, okay, I'm actually not worried at all. I don't need to double back and say, oh, okay, forget about this contract. We got to go with someone else, right? I was very happy to be able to stick with Henry. And our earliest work was actually very web development focused. We were launching our first national campaign called a National Agenda for Black Girls. And the focus of that was to center the needs of Black girls and gender expansive youth of color in national policy. And we needed a website and some fun accoutrements that go with that. And the team was great. And we were super excited to work with Henry. And I also felt very good about being able to partner with Do Big Things, because the young people that we work with, we really consider ourselves, and we organize our work in a way so that we're working not on for them or like on their behalf, but alongside them. So we do direct service work, campaigns and policy work, and then also the culture shift work to move the needle in, national dialogues about Black girls and their leadership. And so as we're doing that work, all of those, we call it the three-legged stool. Obviously, they all support the seat, right? So they're always interlocking. So young people are moving into these consulting relationships with us. They're moving into the technological advances that we're making. And my team, the marketing and storytelling team, I founded it in 2019. GGE didn't have an official department yet. So we were also in very early stages of building our digital ecosystem and how that would support this work. And so I was able to say, okay, if we're going to feel good about bringing young people into a space with these consultants, I have to really trust them. And not to say that all Black folks are monolith, because obviously we are not, but it is a nice added layer of trust there, just at the forefront, to say, okay, there are folks of color, there are Black folks here that we're going to have interfacing with the young people that we're working with. And in spaces where you don't get a ton of time to have, your constituents interfacing with the tech and the tools, or the folks who are managing those tech and tools right off the bat, I wanted them to feel safe from the beginning in sharing their voice, in sharing their leadership. And we've focused very much on using personal storytelling as a mechanism for change. So we didn't want young people working with any type of consultants who were going to make that more challenging than it already is going to be, depending on the audience that they're speaking to. And another layer too that was really important to me is that when they're seeing the folks that we're working with, our organization, GGE, is a Black, femme, queer-led organization. So it is super important to us that we're able to illustrate different types of leadership and how leadership can look. And I really like to hire consultants, and have had the benefit and resources and support from GGE to hire consultants who identify with our young people across that identity spectrum. And so when young people are moving into this space as a career, we hope, when they consider their next steps, they can say, well, I've seen someone do this who looks like me. I have people who look like me doing this, and I don't have to feel like I'm alone in this space. And they also have the benefit of saying, I've worked with these sophisticated tools before, and I don't have to start from, zero doing this alone on my phone. They know these advanced tech solutions are out there to support them, like Every Action and NGP Van. So it was a no-brainer for us to work with Do Big Things as a commercial for them.
Thanks. I did not pay her to say that, I promise.
That was
Well, but a good endorsement, it sounds like.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'll put it down as a testimonial for y'all's website.
There you go. So next question, again for Henry and Keela. I met you both through getting your diverse clients set up on NGP, on Every Action. So what are the benefits of having like a multi-channel tool such as NGP in EA to help with the campaigns and organizations that are Black Black candidates, Black candidates, Indigenous candidates, people of color, and then the organizations that serve them, and they're like volunteers, voters, donors. So like, what have you seen that has been the benefit of like a multi-channel like tool so far? So Akila, I don't know if you want to start this time.
Yeah. So I would definitely say that, in Every Action and an NGP are just essential. I pretty much walk into every campaign, especially if it's like starting at like the foundation of like, oh, we're just getting everything together. We just got a treasurer, we just got our EIN. And I'm like, so who are we going to be utilizing as our database? And I always explain it to them in the sense that we can house all of our donors, all of their information, any notes that we want to tag on, any call time engagement that we're going to utilize, as well as run our digital program, all of the emails, the ability to capture every single little bit of, who opens, building out our, open rates and what those look like, building those lists. And then, really having the ability to when you have, once they're established, you can do list swaps, things of that nature. And it's super easy to just have someone pull out of theirs, their NGP, you pull out of yours, you do that swap, all of the van IDs are there, and it's just pretty seamless. So, I think that it's a major value add. And I think that you all have done a really great job of working with candidates of color um, where they are financially. Some folks see NGP as a lift. I'm always like, you have to invest money to make money. However, some people are like, well, we can stick with our Google spreadsheets. And I'm like, but can we though? I mean,
No,
we need
no, we can't.
150,000
No,
names. I don't think we can
no.
do that this way.
Mm-mm.
And really have things organized. And I have seen you all, not necessarily bend over backwards, but be accommodating to candidates where they are. As Henry said earlier, we have to do the additional steps and additional work to make sure that those candidates get the attention that they need. And you all have provided a resource and a tool for them to be able to do that. And then, once you have the campaign up and running, you then have every action that can then be leveraged for all of the volunteer engagements, all of the forward-facing events where you can capture all of that data and information. So I constantly tout that it's an amazing tool. And I appreciate the fact that you all are constantly evolving. It's something that we can continue to use as an asset and resource.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's a lot of what Akila mentioned. I think from a candidate side, I think it's that ability to grow with a campaign, like, right, and then not have to change every time, because a lot of our candidates do make it to the next round, and then we don't want them swapping out all the way and through, right? And so one of the things that we can do is we can train them, and that training is going to be as valid as needed as the campaign grows. From an organization perspective, like from Morgan's perspective, Morgan, we came in and we did it, and we were able to slowly bring in different departments onto the same platform to allow them to have a 360 view of the folks that they're working with, right? So we started with the marketing department. Eventually, we're going to bring in the development department. Eventually, we're going to bring the program services department. And so the tool can grow as the organization see and get the buy-in and understand the efficiencies for it and build the muscle to start becoming a little more data informed, right? Data centric. We can bring on different part organization when they're ready, right? And without having to have a whole big change about it. So we've seen it work both in terms of, for the political folks, but as well for the advocacy folks, right? And sometimes they start with just advocacy actions, and then it's story collection, then it's donations, then it's direct services. And I think one of the things that's important is also it's customizable, right? So with Morgan's organization, there's some data that we don't want in there, right? Just for who they're working with, for safety reasons, for whatever reason. But it doesn't mean we can't use the tool. We have the ability to customize it and allow them to continue to do the good work that they're doing. So it's been great in that regard.
Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, also I guess to Morgan, right now you're using it just Henry just mentioned. And so how do you see what are the benefits of having your internal staff and as well as your youth organizers using those tools? What are the benefits of that?
Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough how helpful it is to have a tool that allows for us to enter it in waves. And it has certainly been a growth edge for us, which is an exciting one to me from the nerdy digital infrastructure side, of course. I'm super hype about it. But other folks are like, oh, we were used to this completely different tool or this completely different system, and now there's new things. And we, the way that Henry's team has led the work has been really great because my team came in first. We're getting familiar. We're getting situated and oriented. And so we can also be resources to our colleagues in helping them get onboarded into the next phase of the next phase of the onboarding for them. So that's been really great. I feel like it's a tool that we can really play in and enjoy and like has been said, to evolve with, because we had these needs for a long time to move into a more sophisticated interface, and just kind of hadn't figured out what that thing was or how to do it. So thankfully the Do Big Things team was like, we got y'all, thankfully. But it's been very interesting because, growth edges can be uncomfortable, hence the edge part. But I think that it's also been really useful in terms of folks being able to see the work that we've been doing for so long has this very official, intentional investment made in it, both in terms of financially and time, right? people are doing such good work at GGE to shift this culture around Black girls. We do a lot of what we would refer to as, I guess one would refer to outside as like defund work, but we've always been working to get police out of public schools, for example. And, that messaging, it needs to reach, but we didn't have the tools or tech. And we've also done digital ads with Do Big Things. So that's really helped us to expand our messaging's audience. And that has been so critical, not only, of course, for the work, but also for staff morale, just to see like, oh, we're reaching people, and we can see that data and we can observe it and make data-based decisions. I actually come from a tech background, not an advocacy background necessarily. And so, I'm always like, well, what's the data say? Like, why are we doing it this way if we don't have stats to tell us to do it? So it's been really exciting to work at the tool and see people see those numbers and that means something for them. And then with young people, it's very cool to know that, like I was saying before, like we're upskilling them as well. They're getting this opportunity to be inside of this technology that, yes, does, require money and time and teams to move and leverage. And they can see that and not be out of their personal budgets yet. When they get into that stage of their career, sure, they'll figure it out. But for now, it's just really cool to see them have access to something like this so early. And, my work in the digital and communication space doesn't always interface with our campaigns so directly. So frankly, personally, it's very cool to get to show a young person something like this or help them plan how it can support, how they can organize with GGE and leverage these tools moving forward, because it'll grow with us, as Henry said. And, to get to do that kind of coaching one-on-one, it's very, it's just like a reason why you're like, I remember why I'm doing this work, right? Because I'm getting to do this one-on-one relationship building and skill building. So it's been a great tool for all of that.
Yeah, no, and I think, we talked about this, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and I remember feeling like the same way, like, oh, like this is why like this work matters, because when you mentioned that your youth organizers were now aware of different tools to organize people, right? Not just using their phone to maybe just like talk, call people, but now that there's a platform that they can learn and then use that in the future, I was just like, oh yes, that makes sense. Of course, like they know this now, and then like in 5-10 years when they decide to run for office, they could be like, hey, I already know how to, like, I know about this, I know about these tools, and I can go
Absolutely.
about it.
They'll have that technological landscape foundation that won't slow them down in the future.
Yep, exactly. So to shift back to like, I guess the consultants aspect of it, so Henry, Akila, so like spotlight on you all. So what
No
advantages do
pressure.
you bring,
Uh-oh.
right? So what advantages do you bring, right, as a person of color, to those organizations, to those campaigns that are seeking out like consultants, right? So what advantage is it that, to work with you versus someone else?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I can kind of give you two examples that happened honestly within the last 3 months. Like, right, we have a candidate who's running, who's running in the South. We'll just say that, keep it vague. But I mean, on they came to a website and they were like, "Oh my goodness, I love the fact that your website said stop Asian hate." Like, right, and like that's what like led to the phone call, and 5-10 minutes in a conversation, we're talking about that as a candidate, they're going to be facing racism. Like, right. Like they're like, race is going to be a massive part of this, like, right, like, and we need to figure out a way to break through, because like I don't look like the people that are going to be voting for me, right? And that is just a conversation that I don't see them having with majority white consultants. Like, right, I'm not saying majority white consultant cannot do a good job, I'm not saying they can't get us a win, I'm not saying any of that, but I think there are some conversation that you can get through a lot faster when you have folks that have that lived experience, right? We had, again, we had a candidate who came to us and who was running in places in Illinois that I will probably never go to, but like, right, it's like, no, they're like, I play football, people know me, I'm Black, I am married to a white woman, and that kind of stuff, but like, I need the support for the business community, and there were some implied things in that like we're like basically on the phone, a couple of us like, hey, we got you, we know what you're trying to say, like, right. and so we can allow candidates to bring a certain level of authenticity to themselves and to the campaign that I think we get there quicker. I'm not saying, again, that majority white candidates and consultant cannot do that, but I think we kind of it's what Morgan was referring to. There's an extra layer of understanding of lived experiences that we bring to the forefront of the campaign, and it's like trying to keep them authentic and being like, you have multiple audiences, but you got to be you, and got to figure out how we allow you to be you and allow you to shine and come through, because that's what's going to get you elected.
I would definitely agree with what Henry said. And, also the key thing is, when you're dealing with, and I would just be very honest, sometimes when you're dealing with white consultants, they work at times in a cookie cutter structure, which means that you try to take a Black or a brown, indigenous, Asian candidate, and you try to force a square peg in a round hole. And that doesn't work. So I think, there is an ability to just kind of speak the language and also speak to the lived experience, as, Henry shared, and really be able to kind of bring that to the conversation when you're working with digital and when you're working with others, as far as like what the messaging looks like and how to best, go about, engaging with donors and how best to start that conversation, especially when the candidate doesn't really have the network or the ties. One thing that I can say from a financial standpoint and doing fundraising, I've built a very solid, I guess, book of business and relationships. Political engagement is extremely transactional. So normally when a candidate calls, a donor knows exactly what that call is about. They know that there's going to be an ask for something or a dollar amount. And I think that as a fundraiser, it is imperative on us that we make sure that we maintain those relationships and that rapport long term. I still engage with quite a few donors nationally, and that's something I can then bring to the table when working with an organization, or if I am working with a candidate. It's like, oh, I know 5 to 10 people right now that I know would want to talk to you about this. And it kind of helps them open the door. It helps kind of get the money to flow freely. And then it also helps, to build stronger stakeholders in the campaign, which I think is important. Donors and political stakeholders need to feel like they have some ownership of the race, and that they are seen and heard. We all know how this works. And, you have to kind of make sure that they, have their needs met just as you would with the candidates. But you can build a really strong rapport that way. And it's something that I do appreciate. It's helpful because sometimes they come to the table and they have the best ideas and the best intentions, but they have no Rolodex. And you've got to get them over that hump. And then you have to be able to pull in all of the Black PACs nationally. And I think that that's probably something Henry and I can do. It's like I can pick up the phone and I can call the collectives and call the CBC. And if it's a woman, call the Higher Heights and call the DFAs and get everyone together to rally around this person, to have that dialogue. And then when you speak with some folks or some consultants, it doesn't even cross their mind that that's one of the first things you should do to make sure that they get that, internal support from organizations of color, as well as figuring out ways that they can be elevated to, get their message across.
Yeah, and if I may jump in here, and it's not just like brown and Black folks and indigenous folks working with political unions, but it's also like organizations that are majority whites. Like, right, we know that some organizations have had to make a lot of statements around, for example, BLM, right, and they didn't know what to do because it didn't have Black and brown folks at the table giving them that advice, right? I have personally written a bunch of statements for organization around BLM, right? And to some organization, as a consultant, I was like, no offense, I don't really care what you have to say. Like, you should instead shine your light on this organization that has been doing this work for about 10 years now. Like, right? Because me as a Black person in America, like, I don't care what you have to say. I mean, I will draft a statement for you, but to be candid, that's not going to be an effective statement because that's not a thing that you do. And that's not a thing that you should say. So instead, here are 3 organizations that work in the same, ideologically where bandwidth where you are. Feel free to shine the light on any of them or all 3 of them or all 5 of them or whatever, right? So again, we bring a different perspective to that, right? And so that you can see that happening, right? Because even recently, I'm a huge soccer follower, right? I'm a huge soccer follower. And in the NWSL, we can see what's happening right now to the women players. But over the last week, you've also seen that the Black women players have kind of faded to the background. Why is that? They're still, and that's because probably some of the folks advising the NWSLPA are not taking that into account. It's not that they're doing wrong work. It's just that, like, hey, no offense, all of this NWSL stuff started with a Black player. And now the shine is gone from that, and it's like, no, it's a collective, like, right? And so if you have a consultant of color, can say, hey, by the way, yes, we need to move this forward, but don't forget about these folks as well, and here's how we ship it together so everybody wins.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's see. Next question. And I guess I should have mentioned also, if anyone has any questions who is watching right now, be sure to put that in the chat and we can definitely make sure we hold some time for that. So so if you do have any questions, please let us know. Let's see. So next question. So now we've mentioned, okay, here are the advantages of working with, with you all, right? And Morgan has laid out the advantages of, working with you all as well. But now, how do you find, like, how would candidates and these organizations find you, right? Like, where are you guys? Where are you? And then vice versa, right? Like, where would you suggest the candidates and organizations look for you guys, right? Like, so if they've never heard of Do Big Things, where are you placing yourself, right, to make yourself accessible to these organizations and to these campaigns? And then Morgan, yeah, like, how did you go about trying to figure out, like, which consultants to use, and where did you look?
Should I start us off?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
All right. Yeah. This is a great moment because I actually don't remember, Henry, how we got connected, although I'm sure I had like a plethora of places where I was screening people through. Do you remember?
Yeah, grant makers for girls of color.
Yes, that's right. Because you all worked with them, and we loved their website for Black Girl Freedom Fund so much. And then, yes, okay, wow, that was a year ago. But in pandemic time, it's like a decade.
Definitely, it's like 20 years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so that happened. So that's a great example, of course, of just how naturally through our networks, Girls for Gender Equity, our founding CEO and president, Joanne Smith, is also part of the incredible force of Black women who founded Black Girl Freedom Fund, which is a fundraising initiative to raise $1 billion for Black girls. Is it 10 billion? I think it's 1 billion.
It started with 1 billion, but I wouldn't be surprised if they've already. Yeah, it started with 1, but I wouldn't be surprised if they upped the ante. They were doing great.
As they should if they haven't. But yeah, so that's such an incredible group of individuals, and we were able to see people collaborating with consultants, doing work that felt like really authentic, real, interesting, and beautiful storytelling about the work and about young people in that work. So yeah, I was immediately like, who did that website? Who do we talk to, right? So that was the first, just a very organic, I saw within my network, an opportunity. But then also I'm very intentional about going to spaces that feel friendly in that way. And so, for example, in my career, I've been able to participate in a bunch of different trainings and organizations and academies and like all that really wonderful stuff to work on campaigns and progressive issues. And so some of the ones that I turn back to and say, hey, everyone in this WhatsApp from our cohort, I'm looking for X, Y, or Z as we expand our work. Do you know anyone who does that? Do you have any recommendations? Do you all do that now if your careers have shifted? And I do a lot of turning back to these spaces where I've spent time and built relationships with incredible organizers of color, because I know and trust them and have spent time with them. So it can be quite closed in that way, but they also are people who have their own experiences, and that allows it to also be open in a very unique way. So if you all know people here in the audience, if you all know people at Kairos, if you know people at Reframe Academy, or in the Radical Communications Network, RadComs, which is an incredible Google group started by Chanel Matthews, who's a brilliant communication strategist. Love Chanel.
She's amazing.
Yeah. Like that's where I'm at personally. Always in that space. And those groups have grown so much just in the last couple of years, obviously, because of all of the things. And so it's just an ever expanding network. And RadComs is also very cool because it's international in a lot of ways as well. So that's also been really great to get to work to do change at a global level. Since GGE started, actually, when I joined the team in 2018, it started just very Brooklyn focused in New York State. And now we've expanded national and all those things. So it's been very interesting to get to push that forward. But yeah, and so it's a lot of networking. Occasionally it's a LinkedIn connection, but it really does feel like who has been in this organizing space with me, and I've seen them do good work, and I trust them to recommend someone to also do good work.
I would have to say very similar. Word of mouth. Like, I still don't have a website for Invictus Strategy Group, and I should.
We should talk. We should talk.
And we're gonna talk. Don't worry. Like, I literally made a note of that. We will talk. And it's not that I don't want to. It's just I'm not. I mean, I've been very blessed that like a lot of it is either through different conversations, and I get an email, or I'm put on a text thread with someone, or I get a phone call, and then I think there's a Black finance consultants like Google group, and then there's like a Black consultant group that Neil Carter put together, and so it's like I'm in all of these groups, so it's like people just kind of come to me, and if there's business I want to go after, like I was on the vineyard earlier this year, and well, not this year, but like a couple of months ago, it was October, it's in August, and it was an opportunity to kind of do some face-to-face engagement and networking, and that actually was very fruitful. So I think it's just a combination of those, but yes, I probably do need a digital footprint. So Henriette will be in touch.
Yeah, I mean, you can come to our website at dobigthings.com, and you can find us there. I try to be a little bit of place, but I think what it really comes down to, I think organizations need to put the legwork into really, finding consultants, like, right, like Akila mentioned, Neil Carter started a group of Black political consultants. There are literally 100 of us on that Slack, right? And so we're there, we exist. But if you're always going to go to the last firm who did the last thing that you did, like, you're not going to get that. So like, my question would be to organizations, are you intentional about how you're recruiting folks? Like, right. And one of the things that we see, for example, like a lot of our firms are not big yet. We'll get there. But if you put out an RFP that requires, 4 or 5 folks to like answer it, it's going to be difficult for us to get there that way, right? So also be intentional about like, how are you doing your recruiting process, and are you like giving people time? Are you reaching out to folks in those groups, as Morgan mentioned, and doing that, right? And we attended a seminar with one of those 3-letter acronyms things, and like they're like, oh, fill out this form. I'm like, I have to sit here for like 3 hours to get you this information. No, it's not. I'm never going to fill out that form. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just not. So I think it's us organization have to do a little bit of legwork and try to pause when they're putting stuff out and making sure that they've reached out to other folks, and then and just also see if the processes allow smaller to medium firms to participate in that, because sometimes that 50-page RFP excludes just folks to share based on time, like, right? And I'm sorry, I'm not going to put 10 folks to write a proposal when I'm one of 20 firms that you reached out to. Like, it's just, the math doesn't add up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So shout out to Neil Carter also.
Yeah, he did that, and it's very active, so I hope he sees this or it gets back to him. But it's there's a lot that can be done, and I think that we as Black consultants do a good job of like providing internal structure for one another, and like uplifting each other, and like sharing these names. I know I have like a list of go-to firms. So it's like, depending on what I'm doing, I now have a new one. But like, depending on what I'm doing, it's like, oh, let me plug you into these 5 organizations or these 5 firms. I don't know if they'll be a good fit, but it's worth you having the conversation, because diversity is essential. And a lot of times, we come into this and you are the only Black and brown voice at the table for a bit, even though it is a candidate of color. So, it's a very, noble role, if you will, and something not to take for granted, because, there are times when you do become an advisor of sorts, and kind of helping shepherd them into some of those decisions as they build their team and they kind of build out their structure and what their strategy looks like.
Awesome. Well, let me see. I don't know if we have any questions. And I know we still have a little bit of time, so maybe I'll just like open up the floor to you three just for any final like thoughts. What would be the best way moving forward, especially as we are going into a new cycle, and finding those candidates, finding those organizations. So any kind of like last thoughts kind of thing until if unless there's any questions, but for the most part, yeah.
I do have one thing. I don't know if it's going to be controversial, and I don't mean to
Uh-oh.
go there. However, I will
Go
say,
there. Go there.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to go there. I'm definitely going to go there. When it comes to proposals, for those of you that may be looking for, diverse firms, please respect their number. One thing that I find when working with candidates and with organizations is I will set what my rate is for my firm and for my staff, the time needed. And sometimes I literally have people come back and they're just like, this is what you charge? Like, I mean, it's almost like they're taken aback. And I'm like, but I pulled your FEC report and you paid a firm.
But
She's like, I got receipts.
So I don't understand why you're trying to undercut me. So, I do say, respect that, the experience is something that, regardless of color, we work really hard as, consultants and, representing organizations. We only get one shot at this. We do not necessarily get to backtrack if there are errors, issues, concerns, and problems. And reputation is key in everything. And as people of color, it's not just us representing ourselves. We're representing for the people that we're working for as candidates. We're representing for the culture. It's important. And, please know that we don't take that lightly. So, respect what's put in front of you, because we're definitely going to always put our best foot forward.
This is where I'll give Morgan like all of the credit in the world, because I was just like, "What's your budget?" and and I think she just said it, like, right. And I was like, "Okay, like this is not the biggest thing, but like I want to work with you, so we'll make it work." Like, right. And she just flat out was like, "Here's our number and here's our timeline," and we're like, "Okay." I was like, let me get back to my team and see what we can do for you here. Right.
Yeah.
And we were able to work because she was very transparent about it, and she was very like upfront and honest, and was just like, this is what I got. Like, there was no promise of additional, like, I mean, we've been working together for like over a year now. There was no promise of additional work or nothing. It was just like, here's my budget, here's what I got to do with it, and here's what I have to get to. And that, I think, set a level of trust that, we had many conversations about like, hey, here's what we can do. Here's how we do it. What's your goal? Here's how we get there with your budget. And like, here's where we have to take some shortcuts to still get you someone good, but to get there. So I don't know. I echo what you said, and I also give Morgan 100% credit on just being
authentic communication is essential.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Henry. That is how that went down. I recall, it's so funny because I actually caught myself as we were talking. I was like, oh, actually, we built an entirely different website than the one I just mentioned, but so many websites have been built recently. But we worked on a team specific website, and it was during a wild crunch time. So kudos back to you, Henry, and your team, because we actually had to build it over the winter holidays that year in order to make our deadline for January and inauguration. And it was just like so many things. And I did have to be incredibly transparent, but I want to say, from the perspective of working within an organization, the larger takeaway here is about the, not the mountains I had to move per se, but just like GGE hadn't necessarily done something like this on this timeline before. Don't look at our organizational website. I'm not even going to say it. It's ggenyc.org, but we're in the process with Do Big Things of rebuilding that site, actually, because it's so dated. But share that to say, we hadn't redone a website in so long that people were no longer familiar with that process. And I internally had to say to the people I need to report to get the money, to get the numbers, I said, look, here's the reality. Here's what we're up against. I also have experience as a consultant prior. That was actually I was consulting prior to coming in-house at GGE. So I was like, this is what they're going to need to know. And this is what we need to be super transparent about and clear. So I need y'all to be clear with me about what we've got to work with here. And because we had such a successful first project, we have been able to expand our work, which makes me feel great because I love working with Henry's team and getting to interface with Henry and being like, everything's going great still. Thanks for checking in. It's like, it's just such so important for the relationship building, which, as Akila said, is so key. Relationships are primary. And if you don't feel safe, held, trusted, heard, respected in that space, what are we doing? What are we doing
Right.
here? Right. So can't sign on the dotted line without those things. So it was definitely, I was definitely very intentional, and folks should be mindful of like, all right, okay, there's bureaucracy in a nonprofit for sure. That's the model. But like, how can we make this work for everyone in a way that's just like not wildly frustrating?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if I had one parting thought would be like you don't have to have a project to diversify your pool of consultants. Like, right? Like it might actually be easier for you to get to know consultants like when you don't have anything. Like, there's no pressure. You can have a conversation, you can understand their processes, you can then you can take the time to like interview them where it's like, have 30 minutes, just monthly, set aside, I don't know, an hour and talk to two different consultants that you've never talked to before, right? And understand that like you can then build up that, so when you have a project you're like, oh, I remember talking to Keela, I remember talking to Henry, I remember talking, literally there's hundreds of us like literally on the Slack, right? And so if you're doing that, you get that muscle and you get to know those folks, so when you do have a project, you have your top 5, your top 10 folks, and you're not now looking for like, oh, where do I get find BIPOC firms and I got 10 days to like turn this thing around, like, right? So we can certainly be, so that's the one thing I would encourage folks to do is set aside some time, whether it's biweekly, monthly, to find firms that do, that are led by folks of color, that are led by Indigenous folks, that do good work, right? I don't think the quality of work goes down not one smidge, and get to know them so that when you do have a project, which will eventually come, you have a group of folks that you feel good about, that you feel like that you feel like you trust, that can deliver on that work. So that would be kind of my parting shot is recruit before you have a project.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. I like it. And we do have a question actually about, and I think you guys all like kind of talked about this, but is there a clearinghouse or site where candidates or organizations can search for a list of Black or Indigenous people of color consultants, or like somewhere that posts the RFP? So I know you mentioned Neil Carter's list, but that sounds like, I don't know if that's like an internal just Black consultants list. Is there anything else that you all know of or members of where you can find, like, people can find that information?
I know of Neil's and then 2 others. One is for women, and then I have a third. And then also, it's been around forever, and I don't know if how relevant it still is, but I still Black Beltway. Do you all know about
Oh
Black
yeah, I
Beltway?
remember
Yeah.
Black
Yeah,
Beltway.
like they
Where is
still
that?
are they it's
Are they
been
still
I
active?
think I've been on
It's
their
been
list
on
there
there.
since like 2010.
Yeah.
It's like a Google group, but I know
Yeah.
that they're still active and they post everything from jobs to consultant needs to RFPs. So I would definitely say that one. And it's just a matter of like logging into it. So Ashley, I will get those to you.
Yeah, and
Um,
you brought it up. I was like, "Oh wow!" Like I remember following it, and I don't
yeah.
know what happened, but yeah, no, that
So
is
if you
another
go
one. Black
to
Beltway.
the blackconsultantgroup.com, the blackconsultantgroup.com
Okay.
is the one. That's Neil's group, and there's a bunch of
Mhm.
consultant in there, anything from field to um, um, uh, finance to digital, and that kind of stuff. So right, so to literally there research, yeah, comms, anything that you can find there, there's folks there. So it's the blackconsultinggroup.com. I'm gonna just flat out say I don't know any Latino groups, but I also know a couple of folks that are working on that. Chuck Roca being one of the
Yeah.
leaders in
Yep.
that. If you want to talk about consultant of colors, Chuck will talk your
Oh,
ear
Chuck,
off
that is his lane.
for
I love him.
for a good 2 hours or 2 days, whichever how much time you have. So I know, like, if you're looking for Latinx consultant, you can definitely give
Mhm.
Chuck a shout out, and or myself, we'll point you in those directions as well, like, right, in that regard. So I know Chuck will talk your ear off about that. So I don't know that he has a website, but Chuck Roca is leading the way there in terms of consultant, Indigenous consultant. I know ANPL is is recruiting folks for that. So I think if you want to check out ANPL, and you can just look them up. The full disclosure, they were a client of DBT. They finally got big enough and spread their wings and are back on their own. But ANPL was a client of DBT. So for folks of Indigenous, that would be a good place to start as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'll add, you can join the group that we were mentioning before that Chanel created, Radical Communicators Network, RADCOMS for short. It's a Google group. So I believe you have to like do like a very brief questionnaire to get in, right? But it's just like, do you work on progressive things? Are you in comms? And then you're in, right? And then there's, of course, like a rules of the road kind of brief that you read through. But that is open to folks who identify as that. And I'm trying to think, there's also, this isn't consulting specific, but if you were hiring for full-time or consulting roles, I believe there's also a newer platform that has a newsletter called Black Remote She. And that's also really great because it does not limit you to geography and does not limit folks who are looking to do good work to a specific geography as well.
Can you repeat that one more time? Black Remote She?
Black Remote She.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that Akila posted it, but I know that Gain Power has also Amy, and I'll give her full credit for that, has also Amy Pritchard put her full work into bringing highlighting both women and folks of color in kind of like a new structure of Gain, right? And I know that she's been hosting a couple of events in that regard. So Gain Power is also one, and I think this is a challenge to groups like AAPC and some of the other folks to perhaps be a bit better about highlighting consultants of Black and brown consultant and Indigenous folks as well, because I think that's typically where people go, and it's not easy to find those folks, both on honestly the progressive side and also the conservative side, right? Because as much as I hate to say it, not all Black and brown folks are Democrats.
Yeah.
Oh, really quick. Someone asked, what does ANPL stand for Googling purposes?
Yep, I'm gonna find the link.
I know, moment of transparent facilitation. We're all here swapping ideas in the chat. And
yeah.
There's two chats. There's our chat we're typing, and then Mira's graciously putting everything forward.
And then the Radical Communicators Network, can you repeat that again? I think someone asked about, is there a link or anything? You just like Google search for it?
Yeah, I think you can just search for it. I do not actually know how one just like finds a Google group because I was invited because I was a student in her master class. But I know that most folks just enter
groups.google.com.
It's the RADCOMS?
Yeah,
RADCOMS. Hold on, I just found it. I'm putting it in the private chat.
Awesome.
Hold on.
Thank you.
There it is.
Awesome. Oh, this is great. Now everyone knows where we could find each other, all of that fun stuff. That's really cool. All right. And then
ANPL is for I just put in a chat there. It's Advanced Native Leadership, advancednativepl.org. Advancednativepl.org.
Awesome. And then there was one other question. Let me just find it. What do you find enjoyable and what do you find challenging in your roles? So I guess, for the consultants, and then I guess Morgan, for you, I guess for looking for those diverse partners, like what do you find enjoyable? What do you find challenging? And we have like a couple minutes left, so that actually would bring us right to the end. Now,
I'll say two things. What I found enjoyable is, I think, as Morgan mentioned, and I've talked to Kaylin, who's at Every Action about this, is like just creating a whole new flux of political consultants and advocacy consultants that look and sound like me. Like, right? I think that is important. I think to me, like, if I never win any presidential race, I never do anything else. But there's like 10 people that are like, oh, I did this because, I once worked for Henry and that's what got me started. I'll take it. That would be for me the biggest win. I think that the most challenging thing is I think still walking in some of these rooms and being like both the youngest person and the only person of colors. And I'm like, some days it's just like, when is this going to change, man? Like, come on. It's freaking like, it's like, only 2022. Let's get this over with. So that was personally, I think that's where I found, but I also have great joy working with folks like Morgan, like, right? Like we talk, like, yeah, I enjoy it. Doesn't feel like work.
Doesn't feel like work at all. Yeah. I'll share a rose and a thorn as well. Yeah, I'll start with the thorn, so something to look forward to. When I've been looking for consultants in the past, it's been the main challenge I think has been a lot of that interfacing. We're all trying to present our best self in that process, and also on the organizational side, there's such like an influx, particularly in this last year, where everyone wants to be part of progressive Black girl focused work, as I have experienced. Folks are really eager to put their skills into that space, as they should be. But what has sometimes happened is that those interactions can be really overwhelming on my side, and there's not an intentional, but like a lack of empathy in moving through that process, right? And so there was actually an exchange that I had, disengaged from, but there was a brief exchange where these folks were like, "So you're just not going to respond to my RFP?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, well, not the RFP, but the proposal, right?" And I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I'm just really inundated, you know." I'm a team. I run a team of 2, and I'm the person responsible for looking at the 20 responses that came in for the request, right, in 1 week. So, um, this kind of piggybacks on Henry's point about like starting the conversations early is great in both directions. I would love for consultants to be like, "Hey, I see like you're doing cool work. GGE looks great. Maybe you don't need anything right now, but like, could we hop on the phone?" And I actually did have that kind of exploratory conversation just last week with a videographer, which turned out to be perfect because we're doing our 20th anniversary next summer and we're going to need some great videos. So I was so grateful to him for showing up in that way. And he was also really consistent and very kind, right? So like he was like, "Hey, I'm following up because you like never responded a week ago." And I'm like, "Thanks for reminding me, it was not intentional." And we did that a few times and he didn't slight me for it. Bless him. He still wants to work with us. So that was great. So, it can be, just being mindful of folks are inundated on both sides. And I know too, folks want to do the work and be involved and pay their bills. And I get it. So just extending and making space, extending grace, giving space, like all of that back and forth, just keeping that transaction fluid is really wonderful and generous and appreciated. So that has been a little thorny. But the rose, I've already said it a little bit, is folks who like really ace it and really are relationship building focus, and who, none of us are necessarily in a role forever. That's just not the way the world is working anymore. And so I love to know that I have relationships that I can move into the next iteration of my career, and also know that I can pass those on to folks that I enjoy working with as I leave positions and say, "I'm now empowering you with this great list of people that I have loved working with, and you should absolutely tap them when you can." So yeah, I think that would be it for me. Akila, to
Awesome.
you.
Akila, to you.
I would
Yep.
have to say, I would say the greatest thing about doing the work that we do is really seeing a candidate or an organization kind of come to life, kind of watching them financially kind of gain that stability, gain those relationships, and really just kind of coaching them through that. Because that's what a lot of it is. It's having like tough conversations and saying, "This sounds really wonderful, but that's never going to happen until you do these 5 things." So I think, that's been one of the most amazing things. I think one of the greater challenges is just kind of fighting through, if that makes sense. When it's a crowded field, you really have to find a way to help that person stand out, to help them gain the resources that they need to move their message, to reach the voters, and really kind of make people pay attention. So I think you really have to be resourceful when it comes to that and think out of the box. And I think sometimes that can be a huge challenge because you have to get people on board. Depending on who you're working with, how the campaign structure is laid out. If you have more traditional mindsets, folks don't necessarily see the value in doing small things that can have great impact. So it's really kind of, taking those risks, bringing them along, and then, hopefully seeing that come to fruition. So they're like, "Okay, this is amazing." So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, I think we are at time. But I want to say thank you so much to you all for, being authentic, being honest about what your experiences have been in this space. Really do appreciate, I think, just learning more about what your positives and negatives have been as you have like gone through working with candidates of color and organizations that serve those communities as well. And so thank you to Netroots for allowing us to have this conversation, out here with the progressive community. Hopefully, I think there was a lot of information that was shared, especially of where you can find organizations like Morgan's and consultants like Makila and Henry. So if there isn't anything else, I think that is it. I think we are all done here. So Mira, let me know what we need to do on our end. But thank you again. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
Bye,
you.
everyone.
guys.
Bye.